Hey everyone, I've been doing a bit of research lately. I looked at it a long time ago because it was becoming a bit of a fad and I can't stand fads, but anyway, I do look into them because a lot of people come to me asking whether they should do it and what it is and how it works in the body and all that kind of stuff. But dieting fads are really, really annoying and most of them don't work. Some do, and there are some that are actually pretty good, but most of them are not worth even reading about. They're a waste of time. Anyway, this fad has been going on for a little while and all these doctors are recommending it based on a study that was done in mice, which is kind of entertaining because they warn people against doing their own research, yet they're using studies in mice. They have done a couple of small people studies, but the results are, compared with like restricting calorie diets, there's no difference. So why would you bother starving yourself when you can do the same thing by just restricting calories? Like, that doesn't make sense to me. But anyway, whatever. The first thing that is wrong with this intermittent fasting ridiculum, whatever the word is the freaking name, right? It is not intermittent. Skipping breakfast every day or eating 8 hours a day and not eating for 16 or whatever the ridiculous craziness is not intermittent. Intermittent means that it's irregular and unexpected. It's not something that you do all the time, like every day, that is expected by your body because you've done it every day. That's not intermittent. So I'm now going to refer to it as timed eating, because usually people do this crazy 16 hours of not eating and 8 hours of eating. Now, if you're going to do that, please don't be skipping breakfast. Like, seriously? What? Did we not learn anything in school about how bad it is to skip breakfast and how it increases your blood glucose and how it messes with your brain and how it... I mean, people are talking about, you know, kids with ADD and all that kind of thing, and kids that have problems at school and how bad it's becoming these days, and most of the time it's because they're not getting adequate breakfast. You ask any teacher, they'll tell you that most children are not eating proper breakfast, if they're eating anything at all. Is it doing them any good? No. So it's not going to do you any good either. So anyway, moving on from that, moving on from the name and the fact that it's breakfast, if you are going to do some sort of timed eating, I would recommend, and I've always recommended this as far as like the best way of eating. That doesn't mean I do it, and that doesn't mean you have to either, but this is the most successful. It's been done for centuries, is to eat like a king at breakfast. So that means that you're having your largest meal for breakfast, because your sugar, your blood sugar is at its lowest when you wake up, right? So when you're eating, that's kind of making a slow release, as long as you're having proper food, because that's another issue which I'll get to in a minute with this intermittent fasting craziness, so that you're having a slow sugar release through the day, right? So that's kind of helping with the insulin resistance and all that, kind of keeping the glucose down and all that sort of stuff, which I agree with. Okay, then you're going to eat like a prince. So we're going to call it the King, Prince, Pauper diet, or the King, Prince, Poor Person diet. So you're going to eat like a king in the morning, have your first meal as your largest meal. That doesn't mean you can have like chocolates and whatever you want to eat. That means having a really good meal with good whole foods in it, right? Nothing with a label, because if it has a label, it's a warning label. We got that? The intermittent fasting diet will tell you can eat whatever you like, and that's a really big problem, which I'll get to in a minute. Then you're going to have your lunch like a prince. So it's going to be your second largest meal of the day, or the medium meal of the day. And that again is going to be something preferably with a protein, just like breakfast, preferably with a bit of a fat, and low carbohydrates. So we're thinking things like vegetables, obviously, because they've got a lot of minerals, they've got a lot of fiber in them, and they've got a lot of benefits to your health. Then you're looking at, if you're a meat eater, you could have a meat as your protein. If you're not a meat eater, you could have a plant-based protein like grains or beans or whatever it is that is your desired protein. Preferably something that's not packaged, like not a packaged fake meat or anything like that. And hopefully not too much soy. We don't want to be doing that, especially as women. But anyway, that's another problem for another day. And as little carbohydrates as possible. So not too much fruit. I mean, you can have berries and things like that that are a bit more low in sugar and a bit higher in polyphenols and other good things that are going to help with antioxidants and those sorts of things. I know this video is going to cop a lot. Anyway, then for dinner, you're going to eat like a pauper. So you're not going to have much for dinner, if anything at all. If you really want to do the fast, do it that way, because your blood sugar is generally the highest in the evening because of the food you've been eating. Some people have a piece of fruit. As long as it's like a fairly low sugar piece of fruit, I'm okay with that. Or like a more ancient fruit. You don't want to be eating the kind of modern, massive, sugar-filled, hybridized fruits that you buy at the supermarket, if you can avoid that. If you can't avoid that and you still feel like you need something to eat, something like a mandarin or a citrus fruit is better than having like an apple or a banana or something that's quite high in sugar. I mean, bananas aren't too bad because they do have a lot of potassium and vitamin B's in there and things like that, but they are quite high in sugar. So if you are concerned about your sugar levels because you're diabetic or whatever the situation is, then having a banana the last thing of the day is probably not a good idea. Sometimes for breakfast they can be okay, as long as they're a whole banana. You don't want to be having, you know, juice or whatever. You can have a smoothie as long as the fiber's still in there, because that's going to help you line your stomach so that you're not getting that full-on sugar release, and you're also not going to burn holes in your stomach with the fructose, which is the problem with juicing. But I wouldn't have one at night just because of the high sugar content in the banana. But something like berries, citrus fruits, things like that that are a bit lower in sugar than, you know, your higher sugar things like bananas, mangoes, apples, especially the modern ones. The older varieties that aren't hybridized are pretty good. They're not as high in sugar, so they're not so bad for you, but certainly the ones from the supermarket, you want to kind of be avoiding those as your last meal. Or you could have like a bone broth or a, I don't know, a tin of tuna or something if you felt like you didn't quite get enough protein through the day. Getting enough protein is really important, and that's kind of behind some of the studies that are showing that this intermittent fasting, and I know I'm calling it that and I said I wasn't going to, but I am calling it that because that's what it's known as, even though it's ridiculous. The studies have shown that people are not getting enough protein and they're actually losing muscle mass, not fat, in these diets, and that's what the evidence is showing in human trials, because there are a few human trials, not many, but the ones that do exist are showing that there is a reduction in muscle mass on DEXA scans. That could translate to bone mass. I'm not sure, it doesn't say, but it could, for females especially, because, you know, you're not getting the protein that you need to make hormones. That's what proteins can be used for. They can be used for lots of other things too, but fats and proteins are really important. And generally when people only have 8 hours in the day where they can eat, and that 8 hours starts after lunch, that's a real problem, because they then try and squeeze, you know, a whole day's worth of food into one meal, and that doesn't mean that they're having a good meal, because they're kind of just going off the times of eating rather than what they actually should be eating. And that's the problem with these doctors that are prescribing this diet, this timed eating diet, is that they don't generally study much nutrition. There are some exceptions to the rules, so don't come on abusing me for saying that no doctors do nutrition. I guess some of them do, but it's an extra subject. It's not something that they generally do much in depth on, because they're not nutritionists, they're doctors, right? So they're suggesting timed eating because they've seen this mouse study, or a couple of the smaller, poorly written, I must say, studies on humans. But they haven't actually looked into the flaws here that are with the studies that actually show that a calorie reduction diet has the same results. And I would go as far to say, I haven't actually like put the three, I should say, diets together to see whether a kind of lower calorie but more nutritious diet, which is what I suggest, has the same results. But I would go as far to say that it probably does. I haven't actually compared them all, but I would say that the results are pretty much the same, because it is kind of calorie restrictive, even though we're not nutritionally restrictive. There's a big difference. It is calorie restrictive, and so that is what's getting the results as well, or getting the same results as the intermittent fasting. So why would you want to, like I said before, why would you want to starve yourself when you don't have to? That just doesn't make sense to me. The other issue that I'm seeing is it's actually causing some anorexia and other food-related mental illnesses. Orthorexia is another one, and there's a few others that are being created, or at least being worsened by this intermittent fasting craze. And the reason for that is people are actually figuring that if they can go 16 hours without food, well, let's go 24 hours, and then let's go 48 hours, and let's go 72 hours, and let's go a week, and let's go a month. I actually heard of someone through people who are working in the same industry as me, and he presented to the clinic to get some more info on what he should be doing with his diet, because he was actually only eating a piece of fruit once a week. He was basically dying. His organs were being eaten by his own body because he had not enough nutrients to keep himself alive, and they actually had to send him straight to hospital because he was extremely skinny. He lost weight, like if you're going to use that as an argument, yes, he lost weight, but the you know, the muscle mass reduction and the body trying to eat its organs, that was a bit of buzzkill, you know. So was the 8 weeks in hospital that you had to have to actually get back to a normal weight and learn to start eating again. But he started on this 16/8 intermittent fasting crap because that's what his doctor told him to do for heart disease, I believe it was. I may be wrong. It was a while ago now that I actually was told this story of a patient that a friend of mine had seen. And that is just crazy. Like, I don't understand why, and they will defend this diet. Like, I've seen people speak up about this on YouTube, put videos out, and I'm sure they'll come onto my video as well and comment about, you know, oh, but I lost X amount of kilos and I have never felt better, and blah, 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 blah. They're like martyrs, these people on this craze diet. They'll defend it with their lives. They're just crazy. I don't understand. It's just a diet, and it's actually doing you more harm than good, especially if you're doing it over a long term. Maybe as a short term, it might be okay. But, I mean, why? When you can just do a calorie restrictive diet, learn how to eat better, and have the same result. I don't understand why this has become such a big thing. I really don't. That's not saying that I recommend against fasting all the time in every single case. I think sometimes fasting can be a really good thing. But usually only once or twice in someone's life should they do a big fast. I do know someone who fasted for 40 days. Right, that's a big fast. They were still having nutrients though, so technically they weren't full-on fasting, but they did not have any food. So they did a liquid diet because they're having teas and things like that that were able to kind of keep things going into their body. And they had really good results from that. Not that I would recommend doing that, but sometimes it might be necessary to stop eating actual solid foods, and that could be because of a bad digestive system. It could be because nutrients aren't getting absorbed properly, which is normally a bad digestive system, or it could be that they're having issues metabolically, and they just need that rest to kind of flush everything out and start again. I certainly wouldn't recommend that for everybody, to stop eating for that long. And I certainly wouldn't recommend it without some sort of nutrient going in, whether that be, you know, at least herbal teas, or smoothies or something like that. I've actually done a 2-month liquid diet. It wasn't as radical as the 48 or the 40-day fast. That particular time was when my digestive system had just decided it wasn't going to work anymore, and I couldn't actually eat solid food. But I did bone broths, I did herbal teas, I did do juices then, but it was only vegetable juice, no fruit juice, because that's just basically, there are some good minerals and vitamins in fruit juices, but the sugar is very concentrated. So I didn't do any fruit juices, but I did do vegetable juices, I did smoothies, and I did protein powders, so that I at least was getting enough of everything to maintain my cellular life, and maintain all of my organs and all that kind of stuff. But there was no actual solid food that I was eating, and that was successful. My guts healed. I was also doing things like slippery elm bark and all those sorts of things to help heal the gut at the same time, and had great results with that. But my problem is with this particular intermittent fasting thing is they're just told by their doctor to go and eat for 8 hours and not eat for 16 hours, but they're not actually told what to eat. They're just told they can eat then. And so they're eating all of this terrible processed food. Like I said before, if it's got a label, it's a warning label. Don't eat that if you're, especially if you're fasting, because everything that you eat is going to be grabbed up and absorbed a lot faster and a lot more efficiently than if you're eating normally, because the body is starving. It's like if you starve an animal and then you let it out onto, or feed it or let it out onto grass or whatever the animal eats, and you watch, you know, you've seen rescue animals and things like that, they will actually gorge on stuff and can kill themselves because of refeeding syndrome and that kind of thing. But if they haven't been starved for that long, maybe it's only been, I don't know, a few days or whatever, and they're absolutely starving, and they'll kind of just they'll eat neat. And usually it's interesting because in the first couple of weeks of having a rescue horse, because that's what I do, they will actually pick up a lot of condition in that first 2 weeks, and then they'll kind of plateau, and it's because all their cells are like, yes, we're getting food, and they're like, quick, grab onto it and hold onto it, don't let it go in case we starve again. They kind of go into that kind of mode, and so they become really shiny and really healthy looking in the first 2 weeks, and then they kind of just stop because the cells go, oh, actually we're getting fed quite a bit now, we can kind of relax and we don't have to take in all of that nutrition, we can kind of just let some of that go. And that's not such a bad thing, because when it's letting go, it's actually letting go of toxins and stuff as well. So it's not such a bad thing that our bodies do that. We need to get rid of toxins. But when you're fasting and things like that, you're going to take up toxins a lot better than if you're just eating normally, because the body is starving. It's waiting for some nutrients. And it's going to grab hold of whatever nutrition it can get. It's a bit like the horse that eats the weeds it shouldn't eat because it's starving, and it's going now and eating poisonous weeds in the paddock because there's nothing else to eat, and then it basically kills itself. It's the same sort of thing that our cells do. And so that I have a problem with as well. If you're going to give dietary advice and you are not qualified to do so, you don't have any nutritional qualifications, then that can be really dangerous and outside your scope of practice. So if you're a doctor and you're watching this and you don't have any nutritional qualifications, yes, I understand that you know how to do research and all that kind of stuff, but please don't be telling people that they should do timed eating or any kind of diet. Refer them on to a dietitian at the very least. A nutritionist would be better, but whatever. You know, dietitians are medical and that's fine. Send them on to them. But please don't be making dietary advice, because this is actually causing a massive issue. And I think that because of this advice, we are going to see rises in issues with muscle degeneration, but also possibly osteoporosis. We could see issues with hormones dysregulating, especially in women, and that is a concern. There is no research to say that it does do that in humans. There is a research showing that it does do that in mice, but it's not in humans. But there's also no research showing that it doesn't do that. So the mouse study shows that there is a potential for issues with women and their hormones and intermittent fasting. So especially women should be very, very aware that this could be a problem, and doctors should be aware of this as well. And if you are good at research and you're recommending this diet to women, I don't know what's wrong with you, but you really shouldn't be doing that. Or do more research if you're that way inclined to suggest that possibly that is a misnomer and it doesn't cause any kind of dysregulation for women's hormones. And the other problem that I have with it is that you're not telling people what they should be eating in the time that they are allowed to eat. So we need quite a fair bit of protein a day to maintain our muscle mass, and it's not getting eaten in that 8 hours that people are allowed to eat. And usually they're skipping breakfast, skipping or postponing lunch, and a lot of them are only having one meal a day. That may not be your suggestion as a doctor. I really hope it isn't, but that's what's happening. So just be a bit more careful about dietary recommendations. I would recommend that you send them to a dietitian at the very least. The strongest place to send them would be somewhere that does holistic stuff, but you're a doctor, so you're probably not really open to that. You know, like, just send them to someone who actually studied nutrition, because they will know what recommendations to make on what people should be eating in the 8 hours that you've allowed them to eat. And also continue to monitor those patients, because the issues around mental health and food are really becoming a bit of an issue with this diet. People are just considering that they can fast for longer and longer and longer and longer, and ignoring their hunger signals, which is kind of what intermittent fasting is supposed to do, is make people ignore that, and then they become less fat because they're eating less. And it's getting to the point where it's getting dangerous. I think it could become a real problem. I think we will see a rise in eating disorders because of this fad diet. And I really think that if you're going to prescribe this fad diet, that you need to monitor your patients and make sure that they are compliant in that they're having good food and, you know, doing all the things they should be doing within that time that you've allowed them to eat, that they're getting enough protein, they're getting enough fat, and that you should be doing DEXA scans on your patients if you are concerned that possibly they're not getting enough protein because of the diet that you've put them on. But really, just don't put them on diets. Don't make any dietary recommendations if you are not trained to do so. Send them to a dietitian. That is the most kindest thing you can do for them. And the dietitian will be able to make recommendations based on that particular patient that suits them, rather than just going on some timed eating thing with little explanation as to what to do. So there you go. There's my 2 cents worth. I'm not a doctor. I don't even proclaim to be a doctor. I'm not a anything really. I'm just a person who does a lot of research. I have my own diseases. I am a health science student in my 4th year now, and that's about it. So I'm not claiming to be anyone, but I am just saying that we need to be a bit more aware of the almost cultish behavior that's going on with this diet that may not be all it's cracked up to be, and that we need to be aware that it is causing these problems in the research, and that as anything whether you're a heart surgeon or a pediatrician or whatever, I don't really care what you are, orthopedic surgeon, neurologist, whatever, possibly you shouldn't be making dietary recommendations unless you've actually done in-depth courses on nutrition, unless you've done in-depth qualifications on nutrition, whether that be a sports nutrition even, or clinical nutrition or whatever. I don't care what the qualification is really, as long as there is one. If you don't have those qualifications, you may be really good at research, that's fine, but nutritional research is different than chemistry or than pharmacological research. And there's a few reasons for that, which I'm sure you're aware of, so I don't think I need to explain that. But I think we need to be a bit careful about what we're prescribing people if we're not in that industry. And I'm not a dietitian either, and I never will be, because I don't trust the medical industry. Everyone knows that. So I would never go down that path. So I'm not making recommendations as far as what diets people should be on. I think that if they are going to be on a restricted calorie diet or a timed diet, that it's been proven that the King, Prince, Pauper diet works, and that there is no evidence of problems with it, and that it has been around for a long time. It's nothing new. And I also think that the research shows that, well, I don't think that it shows, I know that it shows because I've read it, that skipping breakfast is a really bad idea. So we need to not be recommending that. So that's it. I know that I'm going to cop a lot of flack for saying this, but I think that it needed to be said by somebody, because no one's really speaking out about it. There was one video of a doctor who was talking about the possible side effects of this diet, and props to him, like, well done mate, good on you for actually saying something about this, because it is becoming a serious problem, you know, especially for my friends that are practicing nutritionists and naturopaths. These fad diets are a real issue, and they do become almost culty, where there's like martyrs that will basically die for their own diet, which to me just seems ridiculous, but that's how it is. And sure, you can disagree with me, that's fine. Please post about that in the comments and go right ahead. I'm all for that. I haven't posted any of the links to the studies that I looked at, because I really want to encourage people to start looking for things themselves. So I found the research on PubMed and on Google Scholar, which are pretty good as far as being able to find research. And I looked for systematic reviews. There weren't that many, but there were a couple. And that's what I did. So I encourage you to do that if you want to start thinking about doing your own research. That's why I didn't post the links to the research that I did. And I also looked on our university database as well, which obviously you won't have access to, but a lot of the studies that are on PubMed and Google Scholar are on that database anyway, just the more in-depth ones. But if you read the abstract and the conclusion, you can get a basic idea of what's going on. And I think that at the stage of starting out, that's probably all you need to do. Results are sometimes pretty good too, but they don't always post those for free. But generally, abstracts and conclusions will give you a pretty good idea of what happened. I tend to read methods and all that kind of thing because I want to know how they did it. But when you're starting out, it all gets a bit scientific and a bit wordy, and so yeah, starting there is a really good idea. And yeah, just look up for yourself what the problems might be with anything that you've been suggested. I understand that a lot of general practitioners get frustrated with people doing their own research. I'm not really sure why, maybe because they're not understanding it properly or whatever, but I would think that that would be their job to explain what is happening to a person that may not be consistent with the research that they're doing because they've misunderstood something. I did actually have someone come in not that long ago asking about taking manganese for Parkinson's disease, and manganese is actually a known toxin that causes Parkinson's disease. So I kind of politely said that they might want to rethink that, and I knew that because of I know how to research, and so, you know, I looked up on these websites what you know, I just looked up manganese and Parkinson's disease, and every single paper was on the toxicity levels and how they cause Parkinson's disease. So taking manganese when you have Parkinson's disease is probably not a good idea. And that was my own conclusion, and I'm sure that would have been the conclusion of a study that studied that, but there were actually no studies that were done on taking manganese as a supplement for Parkinson's disease. So the conclusion I came up with was probably don't take that, because it's all these studies are showing toxicity of manganese causing Parkinson's disease. So yeah, you need to be a little bit logical, I think, in doing research, and go to your doctor and ask them about XYZ research that you've done on whatever condition it is that you're concerned about, and it should be their job to then explain to you why your research is good or why your research is bad, and then explain to you what is going on. So that should be their job, and yeah, that's all I really have to say on that issue. So anyway, I encourage anyone to say whatever they feel, whether you agree with me or not. I don't really care. I'm just saying what the research says. Like I said, I'm a nobody. I'm not a dietitian. I have studied nutrition though, and I am not a doctor, so you can do with that what you like, but this is my opinion on the intermittent fasting craze. It may be slightly more educated than most opinions, but it is still an opinion, and that's just how it is. So be careful out there, people.